Discover the Stoic way to reignite love, trust, and lasting joy in your relationship. I tried the impossible, using ancient Stoicism to save my broken heart, and it worked. Okay, listen up. Imagine this. You're standing in a room, and the air is thick with silence. But it's the loudest silence you've ever heard. Across from you is the person you built a life with. The person whose laugh used to be your favorite sound in the world. And now there's just a chasm. An emptiness. You feel it in your gut. That sinking dread that tells you, this is it. This is the end. Everything you poured your heart and soul into. Every late night talk. Every shared dream. Every single inside joke. Just gone. Vanished. That was me. Not that long ago. My relationship. Something I cherished more than almost anything. Felt like a ship sinking right before my eyes. And I was paralyzed. I tried everything the magazines said. Everything my friends suggested. Everything Hollywood promised. Nothing worked. It just felt hopeless. We were drifting apart. Two strangers sharing a history. And the pain was unbearable. I felt like a failure. Like I had somehow fundamentally broken the one thing that mattered most. Maybe you've felt something similar? That desperate, gut-wrenching feeling that the love, the trust, the joy you once had, is just over. Lost forever in the noise of everyday life. The disagreements, the unfulfilled expectations. I was there. I hit rock bottom in that relationship. And I thought, okay, I need something radical, something nobody else is talking about, something ancient. I started digging, not into relationship counseling at first, though that came later. No, I went way back, thousands of years, to philosophers who weren't writing about dating apps or communication strategies. They were writing about life, about suffering, about finding peace in chaos, about something called Stoicism. Now, you might have heard of Stoicism. Maybe you picture some old guy in a toga, sitting on a rock, looking stern and emotionless. That's what I pictured. And honestly, at first, I thought, how on earth is this going to help me when my partner barely looks at me anymore? It seemed irrelevant, cold, but the more I read, the more I realized something mind-blowing. These philosophers, guys like Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, they weren't trying to kill emotions. They were trying to understand them, to master them, to stop being tossed around by the waves of external events and other people's actions. And I thought, wait a minute, what if the key to fixing my relationship isn't about changing them, but about changing me? What if the chaos I felt in my relationship was a reflection of the chaos inside me? This was a shocker. Let me tell you, my whole life, I thought if my relationship was struggling, it was because we were struggling, because they were doing something wrong, or I was doing something wrong. It was about the interaction, the dynamic. But Stoicism pointed a finger right back at me. It said, essentially, hey, you can't control your partner's moods. You can't control their history, their habits, their fears, their desires. You can't control if they leave you, or if they yell at you, or if they forget your anniversary. All of that is outside your control. At first, this felt incredibly disempowering. Like, great, so I'm just a leaf in the wind of my relationship? But then came the kicker. The Stoics said, but you can control one thing. The most important thing. You can control your judgment about these external things. You can control your reaction. You can control your own thoughts, your own desires, your own actions, your own character. Whoa, let that sink in for a second. They were telling me that the pain I felt wasn't caused directly by my partner's actions, but by my interpretation of their actions, by my demands that they be different, by my fear of losing them, by my resentment that things weren't the way I wanted them to be. This was a deeply challenging idea. My ego screamed, no way, they hurt me, it's their fault. But the Stoic wisdom was persistent, like a quiet voice in the storm. It said, okay, they did something. Did it hurt? Yes. Is that external action inherently bad? Or is it your judgment of that action, your attachment to a different outcome, that is causing your suffering? This was a massive shift. A philosophical moment that felt less like reading a book and more like seeing the Matrix. Everything I thought I knew about relationship problems was flipped upside down. It wasn't about pointing fingers anymore. It was about looking inward. The Stoics gave me a map. Not a map to my partner's heart. That's a journey I'm still on, but a map to my own mind. They taught me about the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, our thoughts, judgments, desires, aversions, actions, and some things are not up to us, everything else, our body, property, reputation, other people, external events, and they were brutally clear. Focus only on what is up to you. This seemed impossible in a relationship. My relationship is literally about another person. How can I not focus on them? But the Stoics weren't saying ignore your partner. They were saying stop basing your happiness, your peace, and your actions on things you cannot control, namely, your partner's internal state and external behavior. Instead, focus on what you can control, how you respond to their behavior, how you choose to interpret it, how you choose to act, regardless of how they act. This was hard, really hard. My initial attempts felt clunky, fake. My partner would say something that would normally trigger me instantly, a critical comment, a dismissive tone, and my gut reaction was still defensiveness, anger, hurt. But now, I had this little Stoic voice in my head. It wasn't suppressing the feeling, it was questioning the judgment behind the feeling. Okay, they said X. My impression is that they are being mean, critical, unloving. Is that necessarily true? Is that impression serving me? Can I choose to see this differently? Can I choose to respond with calm or curiosity instead of matching their energy? This was a battle, an internal war waged over every minor disagreement, every perceived slight. I remember one specific Tuesday evening. We were talking about something mundane, logistics for the week, and suddenly, the conversation escalated, voices rose, accusations flew. My old self would have doubled down, defending my position, attacking back, but this time, I paused, mid-sentence. I just stopped. I took a breath, and I looked at my partner, not as the enemy in this moment, but as a fellow human being who was also clearly in pain or frustrated. And instead of my planned retort, I said, quietly, "Hey, we're getting worked up. This isn't helping. Can we just pause?" The effect was unexpected. My partner, geared up for a fight, blinked. The tension didn't instantly vanish, but the trajectory changed. Instead of spiraling downwards, we hovered. It was a small moment, almost insignificant to an outsider. But for us, in that moment, it was huge. It was the first crack in the wall of reactivity we had built around ourselves. It wasn't a magical fix. We didn't suddenly hold hands and sing Kumbaya. We were still frustrated, but I had applied a Stoic principle, focusing on my own controlled response, pausing, suggesting a break, instead of being swept away by the uncontrolled external event, their escalating tone, the heated words. And it worked. It didn't solve the issue, but it stopped the damage. It prevented the usual cycle of saying things we regretted, building resentment. This was my first, wow, moment with Stoicism in action in my relationship. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about micro moments of choice. Choosing reason over reactivity, choosing understanding over judgment, choosing inner peace over external validation or control. It was incredibly difficult, like trying to reprogram years of ingrained habits. There were so many times I failed, so many times I got swept away, said the wrong thing, acted impulsively. But the Stoic path is about progress, not perfection. Each time I failed, I could reflect, another Stoic practice. What impression did I accept without questioning? What judgment did I make that led to a negative emotion? What could I have controlled that I didn't? It was like being a scientist in my own emotional laboratory, and my relationship was the ultimate testing ground. I started applying other Stoic ideas. Negative visualization. What's the worst that could happen in this relationship? What if they leave? What if we never recapture the joy? The Stoics encouraged contemplating these possibilities, not to be morbid, but to reduce the fear of them and to appreciate what you have now. Contemplating losing my partner made me appreciate the moments we did connect, the history we did share. Even amidst the difficulties, it shifted my focus from the fear of loss to the gratitude for what was still present. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Think about the worst to feel better? But it works. It inoculates you against the shock and reduces the power that fear holds over your present actions. Voluntary hardship. The Stoics practiced doing difficult things willingly, cold showers. Simple meals. How does this apply to a relationship? For me, it was swallowing my pride. It was initiating a difficult conversation I desperately wanted to avoid. It was choosing to be the one to apologize first, even when I felt wronged. It was doing things that were emotionally hard, because I knew they aligned with the Stoic virtues of courage and justice, and were aimed at the greater good of the relationship, or at least, my own inner integrity. These weren't pleasant tasks, but undertaking them willingly built resilience, both within me and, eventually, within the dynamic we shared. This wasn't about becoming a doormat, either. A common misconception about Stoicism is that it's about passive acceptance of bad treatment. Absolutely not. Stoicism is about acting virtuously. Sometimes, the virtuous action might be to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, or even, yes, to recognize that a relationship is fundamentally unhealthy and leaving is the most virtuous path for you. But even that decision, when guided by Stoic principles, comes from a place of reason and self-possession, not reactive anger or desperation. It's about making a choice aligned with your values, rather than being controlled by your emotions or external pressure. As I continued practicing, and failing, and practicing again, I noticed subtle shifts. I was less reactive, less easily offended. I started listening differently, not just hearing the words, but trying to understand the underlying impressions and emotions my partner might be experiencing, while still managing my own internal state. This wasn't about becoming a mind reader, but about approaching interactions with a little more wisdom and a lot less ego. The Stoic focus on reason and objective judgment helped me see situations more clearly, stripping away my emotional baggage to understand the core facts. Okay, they raised their voice. Fact, my impression is they don't respect me. Is that the only possible interpretation? Could they be stressed? Tired? Could their tone be unrelated to me personally? This simple act of questioning my first, often negative, impression was revolutionary. This shift didn't magically fix everything overnight. We still had problems. We still had disagreements. But the way we navigated them began to change. The arguments were less frequent, less explosive. There was more space for understanding, because I was creating that space within myself first. By focusing on controlling my own reactions, I was subtly changing the dynamic. It's like the Stoics said, you can't control the other ship in the harbor, but you can control your own sails and rudder. And sometimes, by changing your own course, you create space for the other ship to maneuver differently too. I started to feel a flicker of hope. This wasn't the fake, forced positivity of pretending everything was fine. It was a quiet confidence that came from knowing I had tools. Ancient tools, for navigating the inevitable difficulties of life, including those within my most important relationship. I wasn't at the mercy of my partner's moods or the external circumstances we faced. I had agency. I had my own inner citadel, as Marcus Aurelius called it, a place where my peace couldn't be disturbed by external events. And from this place of inner strength, I could engage with my relationship in a completely different way. I began to see my partner not just through the lens of my unmet needs or disappointments, but as a fellow human being, striving in their own way, facing their own internal battles. The Stoic emphasis on our shared humanity, our connection through reason and the potential for virtue, helped me cultivate a deeper sense of compassion. Even when I was feeling hurt or frustrated, it's easy to love someone when they are acting exactly as you want them to. The real challenge, the Stoic challenge, is to maintain your own virtue, your justice, your wisdom, your courage, your temperance, when they are not. And ironically, practicing this makes you a more stable, more loving, more reliable partner. So, I was making progress. I was learning to manage my own reactions, to question my judgments, to focus on what I could control. The constant internal turmoil was lessening. The desperate clinging to external outcomes was loosening its grip. I was becoming a more grounded, less reactive person within the relationship. But surviving is one thing. Can Stoicism actually build unbreakable trust? And what happens when the past comes back to haunt you? You won't want to miss segment 2. The Stoic secret to forging trust, when everything says run. Okay, segment 2. We've talked about how I stumbled upon Stoicism when my relationship felt like it was collapsing. And how the initial, earth-shattering realization was that the biggest problems weren't necessarily caused by my partner, but by my own internal state, my judgments, and my desperate attempts to control things outside of my control. We touched on how practicing the dichotomy of control and challenging my first impressions started to create small shifts, opening up space where there used to be only reactivity and pain. But let's be real, relationships aren't just about managing your own mind. They're about connection, and at the heart of deep connection lies trust. And when trust is broken, or even just eroded over time by neglect and misunderstanding, it feels like the most fragile thing in the world. It feels like you're walking on glass. How can ancient Stoic philosophy, which talks so much about self-sufficiency and inner peace, possibly help you rebuild something as inherently relational and vulnerable as trust? This was the next mountain I had to climb. Trust, fundamentally, is about reliability. It's the belief that someone will act in a way that is consistent with your expectations, especially expectations of goodwill, honesty, and fidelity. When that belief is shattered, or slowly chipped away, it leaves a deep wound. And my relationship had those wounds. Years of misunderstandings, unmet expectations, and moments where we failed to show up for each other had created a significant trust deficit. We were wary of each other, guarded. It felt like trying to build a bridge out of matchsticks. The conventional advice for rebuilding trust often involves grand gestures, repeated apologies, perfect behavior, and while those things can play a role, the Stoic approach was different. It went back to the core principle. Focus on what is within your control. I cannot force my partner to be trustworthy. I cannot control their past actions, or guarantee their future behavior. Trying to police them, to constantly seek reassurance, to demand they earn back my trust on my terms, that's focusing on the external, on the uncontrollable. And the Stoics taught me that focusing on the uncontrollable is a recipe for anxiety and suffering. So, what can I control when trust is broken? I can control my own actions, my own reliability, my own commitment to living according to the Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, and this is where the Stoic path to trust becomes incredibly powerful. And frankly, counterintuitive to conventional wisdom. Instead of demanding trust from my partner, I focused on being trustworthy myself. I focused on being reliable, not just in big ways, but in small, consistent ways. Doing what I said I would do, being on time, following through on commitments, even when I didn't feel like it, communicating honestly, even when it was difficult. This wasn't about being perfect, it was about striving for integrity in my own actions. Why does this help build trust in the relationship? Because my consistent, trustworthy behavior changed the dynamic. It created a stable point in what felt like a sea of uncertainty. It showed my partner, through action, not just words, that I was committed to the relationship and to acting with integrity. It wasn't about saying, "Trust me." It was about being someone worthy of trust, regardless of whether they immediately granted it. And this had a profound, almost bizarre effect. When I stopped demanding they change, and instead focused on improving my own character and behavior within the relationship, they started to respond differently. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually. My consistent, calm, and virtuous actions began to chip away at their own defenses, their own wariness. Another crucial Stoic insight here is about forgiveness. Now, forgiveness in the Stoic sense isn't about saying, "What you did was okay." It's not condoning harmful behavior. Instead, Stoic forgiveness is primarily for the benefit of the forgiver. Resentment, anger, holding grudges, these are powerful emotions that chain us to the past and poison our present. The Stoics understood that these emotions are rooted in our judgments that we have been wronged, that something external has harmed our inner state. But if we remember that our inner state, our character, cannot truly be harmed by external actions, then the power of the perceived wrong diminishes. Forgiving my partner, through a Stoic lens, meant releasing my own anger and resentment, not because they necessarily deserved it, that's an external judgment I can't control, but because I deserved peace. It meant recognizing that their past actions were a result of their own internal state, their own impressions and judgments. which I could not control. It didn't erase the past, but it disarmed its power over my present emotional landscape. This wasn't easy. There were specific instances that brought up intense pain and a sense of injustice. But I kept returning to the Stoic principles. What can I control? My reaction, my judgment. Can I choose to view this past event not as a permanent scar on my soul caused by them, but as an external event that happened, and my suffering comes from my continued attachment to the anger and resentment it causes? Can I choose to release that for my own freedom? This was a long, hard process. Forgiving didn't happen in one grand gesture. It was a daily practice of noticing the resentment creeping in, questioning the judgments that fueled it, and consciously choosing to let it go. It was like weeding a garden. You have to do it consistently. And as I did this, something incredible happened. As I became less consumed by past hurts, I became more present, more open, and that openness created space for a different kind of interaction with my partner. My internal shift began to subtly, but surely, change the emotional climate of the relationship. We also used Stoicism to navigate external pressures together. Life throws curveballs, right? Financial stress, family drama, health scares. These aren't just individual problems, they impact the relationship. The Stoics teach that these external things, money, health, reputation, are indifference. They are not inherently good or bad. They are simply opportunities to practice virtue. This perspective was incredibly helpful when we faced external challenges. Instead of blaming each other, or letting the stress consume us and turn us against each other, we tried, imperfectly, of course, to view the challenge as a shared problem to be tackled with courage, wisdom, justice, fair distribution of effort, burden, and temperance, managing our own stress and reactions. For example, when we faced unexpected financial difficulties, the old pattern would have been stress, blame, and withdrawal. Applying Stoicism meant first accepting the reality of the situation without excessive panic, accepting the external. Then, focusing on what we could control, our spending, our efforts to earn more, our communication about the situation. It also meant supporting each other with courage and temperance, acknowledging the stress but choosing not to let it dictate our interactions. Offering mutual support rather than adding to the burden. This wasn't about being emotionless about money problems, it was about approaching them from a place of shared reason and resilience, rather than individual fear and blame. Communication, that ever-present relationship hurdle, also transformed through a Stoic lens. How often do we react to our partner's words based on our interpretation rather than their intended meaning? The Stoics constantly urged us to question our impressions. Is the thought, "They said that to hurt me," a fact? Or an interpretation? Can I choose to assume good intent? Can I choose to seek clarity calmly? Epictetus said, "It is not events that disturb people, but their interpretation of events." This is gold for relationships. When my partner said something that stung, my first Stoic step became, pause. Question my impression. Could there be another meaning? Could they be having a bad day? Could I be misunderstanding? This simple pause, this act of questioning my initial, often negative, judgment, prevented countless arguments and allowed for more productive, less emotionally charged conversations. Instead of reacting with hurt or anger, I could choose to respond with curiosity. Help me understand what you mean by that. Or, when you say that, I feel X, is that what you intended? And what about finding joy again? Stoicism is often perceived as austere, even grim, but the Stoics weren't against joy, they simply believed true, lasting joy comes from within, from living a virtuous life, rather than from external pleasures or circumstances. How does this translate to relationship joy? It means finding joy not just in the big moments, anniversaries, vacations, but in the small, everyday moments that are opportunities to practice virtue and appreciate the present. Finding joy in simply being present with my partner, listening attentively, justice, wisdom, offering support during a tough day, courage, justice, sharing a quiet moment of connection, temperance, maybe, in moderating the desire for constant excitement. It's also tied to amor fati, the Stoic concept of loving your fate. This doesn't mean passively accepting everything bad that happens. It means embracing the present reality, challenges and all, as the raw material for practicing virtue and growing. Applied to a relationship, it means loving your partner as they are, with their imperfections and quirks, and loving the relationship as it is, with its history, its challenges, and its unique journey. It's finding contentment and even joy in the shared effort, the shared vulnerability, the shared humanity. It's appreciating the present reality of your connection, rather than constantly wishing it was different or trying to force it into some idealized mold. I remember a specific evening. Things had been tense. We were both tired, stressed from work. The air felt heavy. In the past, this would have been fertile ground for an argument or sullen withdrawal. But I paused. I looked at my partner, saw the lines of fatigue around their eyes, and instead of focusing on my own tiredness or the tension, I chose to focus on the simple fact of their presence. I chose to practice gratitude for the person beside me, weathering the storm of life with me. I quietly reached out and took their hand. No grand words, no attempt to fix the situation. Just a simple act of connection rooted in acceptance and quiet appreciation. And in that small gesture, a tiny crack of light appeared. They squeezed my hand back. A shared sigh. It wasn't a magical solution to our stress, but it was a moment of genuine connection, found not in perfect circumstances, but in the shared reality of a difficult day. That's Stoic joy in a relationship, finding moments of connection, peace, and appreciation within the messy reality of life together. This journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments where I fell back into old patterns, moments where trust was tested again. But each time, the Stoic principles were there to guide me back. They weren't a quick fix. They were a framework for navigating the complexities of human connection with resilience, reason, and virtue. They taught me that rebuilding trust isn't just about waiting for the other person to prove themselves. It's about becoming a person worthy of trust yourself, and extending forgiveness and understanding rooted in self-possession. We've learned to survive the storms, and even build trust. But how do you create that unshakable joy? That feeling that your love can truly last, no matter what? Get ready for segment 3. The unconventional Stoic secret to unbreakable joy, and a love that actually lasts forever. Alright, segment 3. We've come a long way on this journey. We started in a place of deep pain and disconnection, feeling like our relationship was beyond repair. We discovered the radical Stoic idea that the primary source of our suffering wasn't our partner or external events, but our own judgments and reactions. We learned how focusing on controlling our internal state, questioning our impressions, and practicing the dichotomy of control began to shift the dynamic, creating space for a different kind of interaction. In segment 2, we tackled the thorny issue of trust, finding an unconventional Stoic path to rebuilding it by focusing on our own trustworthiness and practicing forgiveness for our own peace, not just for the other person. We even started to see how Stoicism isn't devoid of joy, but redirects us to find it in unexpected places, in shared resilience, in moments of quiet connection, in accepting reality with amor fati. Now, the big question: can Stoicism really lead to lasting, unbreakable joy and a love that feels eternal? This isn't about fairy tale endings. The Stoics were brutally realistic. They knew life is unpredictable, filled with change, loss, and difficulty. They didn't promise perpetual bliss, but they did promise something arguably more valuable: a profound, resilient contentment and the capacity for deep connection that can withstand the inevitable storms of life and love. The ultimate goal in Stoicism is eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or living a good life. A life aligned with reason and virtue. And in a relationship, the Stoic path to eudaimonia isn't about finding the perfect partner or creating a life free of problems. It's about pursuing virtue together. It's about seeing your relationship not just as a source of personal happiness or comfort, but as a shared project in cultivating wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Think about it. A relationship focused solely on mutual pleasure or convenience is fragile. What happens when the pleasure wanes? When convenience is disrupted? A relationship built on shared virtue, however, has a bedrock that external circumstances can't easily erode. When faced with a difficult decision as a couple, approaching it with shared wisdom, seeking understanding, applying reason, justice, considering what is fair to each other and others, courage, facing the challenge head-on, and temperance, managing our own emotions and desires, strengthens the bond. Regardless of the outcome, the joy comes not just from the result, but from the shared virtuous effort itself. Amor fati, love of fate, becomes incredibly powerful here. It's not just about accepting your partner's flaws or the relationship's difficulties. It's about actively embracing them as part of the journey. Your partner's imperfections aren't obstacles to overcome. They are simply characteristics of the person you love. The challenges you face together aren't interruptions to your happiness. They are opportunities to practice resilience. Deepen your bond and grow stronger as a team. Loving your fate in a relationship means loving the entire story, the highs, the lows, the beautiful parts, the messy parts, because it is your story, and it is the ground upon which you cultivate your shared virtue and resilience. This perspective completely changes how you handle conflict. Conflict is inevitable in any close relationship. In the past, conflict felt like a threat, a sign that something was wrong, that perhaps we weren't meant to be together. Through Stoicism, I started to see conflict differently, not as a battle to be won, but as an opportunity to practice temperance, managing my anger, frustration, wisdom, seeking to understand the other's perspective, justice, listening fairly, treating their viewpoint with respect, and courage, having the difficult conversation. The goal isn't to avoid conflict entirely, which is impossible and unhealthy, but to navigate it virtuously. And the joy comes from the successful, virtuous navigation, from emerging from a disagreement with deeper understanding and respect, even if the underlying issue isn't instantly resolved. Practicing gratitude, Stoic gratitude, in a relationship isn't a Hallmark card sentiment. It's a profound philosophical exercise. It's contemplating the reality that your partner, this unique human being with their specific history and quirks, chooses to be on this journey with you. It's reminding yourself, through negative visualization, that this precious connection is not guaranteed forever. What would it feel like if they were gone tomorrow? This isn't to dwell on morbid possibilities, but to awaken a deep appreciation for their presence today. It's seeing the miracle in the mundane, the shared cup of coffee, the comfortable silence, the silly inside joke. These aren't small things, they're the fabric of a life shared. And the Stoic practice of gratitude helps you see and cherish them. This active appreciation, this conscious awareness of the gift of your partner's presence, cultivates a deep, quiet joy that isn't dependent on grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Living the virtues together becomes the bedrock of lasting joy. How do we make decisions wisely as a couple, weighing options not just for immediate pleasure, but for long-term well-being and alignment with our values? How do we ensure justice within our partnership, ensuring fairness in responsibilities, in listening, in understanding? How do we show courage, not just in facing external challenges, but in being vulnerable with each other, in having difficult conversations, in supporting each other through fear? How do we practice temperance, moderating our own desires, our own immediate emotional reactions, for the greater good of the relationship and our shared peace? These aren't abstract concepts, they're daily practices, woven into the fabric of shared life. The joy comes from this shared cultivation of character, from seeing each other strive to be better, for themselves and for the partnership. The Stoic path in a relationship is a path of continuous growth. Both individually and as a couple, life will bring changes, aging, health challenges, career shifts, loss of loved ones, changing dreams. These are all externals, outside of our ultimate control, but how we face them together, with shared resilience and a focus on our shared virtue, is entirely within our control. The lasting joy comes from knowing that you are not alone in navigating these inevitable difficulties, that you have a partner committed to facing reality with reason and courage, just as you are striving to do. The ultimate, wow, moment for me wasn't a dramatic reconciliation or a problem instantly vanishing. It was the quiet, profound realization that the love, trust, and joy I was searching for externally, in my partner's actions or in perfect circumstances, was actually being built internally, within me, through the practice of Stoicism, and then shared outwards. It wasn't about finding the right person who would make me happy. It was about becoming the right person. A person of virtue and resilience, who could bring happiness, peace, and strength to the relationship. This isn't a magic pill. It's a lifelong practice, There will still be disagreements. There will still be moments of frustration or hurt. But now, I have a framework for navigating them. I have tools for choosing my response, for questioning my judgments, for forgiving for my own peace, for finding gratitude in the present, and for focusing on the shared pursuit of virtue. The truly unconventional secret to unbreakable joy and lasting love, the Stoic secret, is this: stop trying to get love, trust, and joy from your relationship. Instead, focus relentlessly on bringing virtue, resilience, and inner peace to your relationship. Cultivate your own character, master your own mind, because the greatest gift you can give your partner and your relationship isn't perfection, isn't constant happiness, isn't freedom from problems. It's the gift of your own virtuous, resilient, and peaceful self, shared willingly and openly on the shared journey of life. The love that lasts forever isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone to build virtue with, side by side, through all the unpredictable, beautiful, messy, challenging moments that fate throws your way. It's a love built not on fleeting emotions or perfect circumstances, but on the unshakable bedrock of shared character and a mutual commitment to living a life of reason, courage, justice, and temperance, together. And that is a joy that no external force can take away. It's a love that truly lasts.